Hi, this is Chapter 4. We're going to be going over 4.1, which is the additive, multiplicative, and ciphering systems of enumeration. Before I start, for each section of these notes, please get out your fill-in-the-blank notes before you start watching this, because you are going to have to go into your notes and fill them out accordingly, and then you're going to have to upload them into Canvas so that you can get points for your notes. So make sure you have those out, pause me, go get them, and make sure they're in front of you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. This is objective number 1, our system. Our system that we use today is called the Hindu-Arabic system, and I will be calling it the HA system for short when we do these problems, so I don't have to write that out every single time. And you have to understand that our system is base 10. So you may be wondering, well, what does base 10 mean? That means that each place value in our system is a power of 10. And I'll be showing you that in a minute. But before I do, please note that according to the zero property rule of exponents, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. And this is important when we discuss base 10, when we deal with the ones position system, or the position value. So here's an example. If I have 500, let's say raised to the 0 power, it equals 1. If I have 10 raised to the 0 power, it equals 1. If I have x, y, z in parentheses raised to the 0 power, it is 1. So that's what the zero property rule means. There is one stipulation where a can't equal 0 because we can't do 0 to the 0 power. So let's go ahead and look at our system a little bit closely, or I should say a little bit closer. If we have the digits 0 through 9, that represents the 1's place value. So I represent that as 10 to the 0 power, because remember we said 10 to the 0 equals 1. All right, the next place value up is the tens position. So 10 to the value of 99 is the tens position, and I represent that as 10 to the first. The hundred system is 100 to 999. This is going to be 10 to the second. The thousandths position is 1000 to 9999, and that's represented as 10 to the third. 10,000 to 99,999 is a 10,000ths position, and hopefully you guessed this is 10 to the fourth. 100,000 to 999,999 is the 100,000ths position, which is 10 to the fifth. And finally, this is not the last place value system, but for us, just as an example, 1 million to 9,999,999 is a millionths place value, and it's represented as 10 to the sixth. And I just want to point out something to you really quick. Notice that the tens position is 10 to the first, because 10 to the first power means 10, and that's it. So notice that there's 1 0, right? The hundreds position, 10 squared means 10 times 10, which is 100, which has 2 zeros. Notice that exponent is a 2. 1,000 has 3 zeros, so 10 to the third is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. So the little exponents correspond to how many zeros you have in each place value. We're going to be using this information a little bit later when we have to write a numeral in expanded form. We're also going to be using it in the next section, 4.2, when we change from our base system to a different base system. Okay, so this is objective 2, Introduction to Additive Numeral Systems. An additive system is a system where we add values together, hence the word additive. Do you see that word add is in there? Our system that we use today is much more complicated than any additive system. However, there is one exception to the rule, and that's the use of Roman numerals. Roman numerals is considered an additive system, and we're going to be looking at that a little bit later. But before we talk about that, we're going to be looking at the Egyptians. The Egyptians had an additive system that we're going to look at. Before we do, we have to talk about the hieroglyphics. So numerically speaking, numerically speaking, the hieroglyphics, or each hieroglyphic, represents a number in our system. Okay, so let's check this out and see how this all works. So if you want to pause me right now and write down each of the hieroglyphics, so you have to draw them in. I drew each one. And I do want to point out that these two that I'm going to highlight, I didn't have enough room, so I made them a little bit bigger over here. And then please write out the next two examples as well. So go ahead and pause it and get that done. And when you're ready, go ahead and hit play, and then you can watch the rest. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down all the Egyptian hieroglyphics and are ready to go ahead and write down what the symbol represents and what the Hindu Arabic equivalent is. So the first one we look at, it looks like the number 1, and what it is supposed to represent is a staff. You have to understand that the Egyptians were farmers. They lived next to the Nile River, so agriculture was a big part of their society. So this makes sense that a staff would represent something that looks like that. The Hindu equivalent, or the Hindu Arabic equivalent, is the value of 1. The next one up is supposed to be a heel bone. So if you look at your feet, you have 2 heels and you have 10 toes. So if you think about it like that, it makes sense that the heel bone represents the value of 10 in our system. The next one down is a scroll. Okay, and if you think about it, the Egyptians were the ones that invented paper. So they would write down information on scrolls and they'd store them. So if you looked at the side of the scroll, it would look like a spiral that you see there. So I'm sure they had many scrolls because now they were able to write on paper. So this represents the value of 100. The next hieroglyphic that I have highlighted there because I ran out of room is supposed to be a lotus flower. It's a lotus flower. And this represents the value of 1,000. Remember, they're near the river. I'm sure there's tons of lily pads and lotus flowers around, so 1,000 makes sense to me. How you draw this one is I like to pretend that the base of it is a diamond ring on the side, so you draw it like that, and then you draw a stalk and put in a crescent moon, and voila, you have your lotus flower. Okay, the next one's kind of weird. This is a pointing finger. Okay, so if you like to watch horror movies, there is a 1928 movie by Universal Studios called The Mummy, and it is about this mummy who comes to life and places curses on people, and he points his finger at them and he says, there's a curse of 10,000 upon your family, something to that effect, but the pointing finger means 10,000. Okay, next one up. It looks like a fish. That's what it's supposed to be. And some people claim it's tadpoles. So let's put that in parentheses. It depends on who is translating the hieroglyphic. But at any rate, the fish represents 100,000. And once again, if you think about it, the Nile's running right next to Egypt. They are, fishing to catch food, or they're looking at the fish, and I'm sure it was plentiful in those days, so it's probably 100,000 fish in that river. Okay, so the last one, which is highlighted on the bottom here, is one of my favorites. This is the Astonished Man. Okay, pretend like you just won the lottery and someone said, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million. You'd be pretty excited. You might even throw your hands up in the air and jump up and down. That's usually what people do, at least on TV. So that's what the Astonished Man is doing. He has his arms up above his head and he has his feet outwards. So that equals 1 million. All right, so hopefully my little trips, the little tip, oh man, can't talk today. Those little tips help you memorize which one's which. Okay, so now we're going to look at an example. So once again, if you didn't write these down, pause me right now. Write down these symbols and these next two examples that are highlighted here, because we're going to be working on them and we're going to be translating them. So go ahead and write down the Egyptian symbols, take your time, and then push play. All right, so you're back with me. That's good. So we're going to write the Egyptian numeral as a Hindu-Arabic numeral. And we have to take these values and turn them into our values and add them together. So the first thing I see is the lotus flower. I know that the lotus flower equals 1,000. So I put that down. Plus. Now I have 3 scrolls. So I can take a shortcut and do 3 times a scroll equals 100. So I know that's going to be 300. So right now I have 1,000 plus 300. Plus, we have 3 heel bones. So I can take the shortcut of 3 times 10 because a heel bone represents a value of 10. So plus 30. And if I add those up, 1,000 plus 300 plus 30, I get 1,330. And that is my answer. By the way, you are allowed to use calculators. You just cannot use something that solves problems for you, such as a symbolic calculator. If you're not sure if your calculator is symbolic, first of all, it's usually a graphing calculator, and second of all, it's usually a Casio. So if you have one of those, let me know. You will not be able to use that on the test. All right, moving on. Write the Egyptian numerals as Hindu-Arabic numerals. So we see 3 astonished men, 2 fish, 1, 2, 3, 4 scrolls, 2 heel bones, and a staff. So let's go ahead and translate. Once again, I'm going to take the shortcut. I have 3 astonished men, so 3 times 1,000,000, missing a 0 there, plus I have 2 fish, so fish stand for the value of 100,000, so 2 times 100,000, plus I have 1, 2, 3, 4 scrolls, so 4 times 100, and finally, well, not finally, 2 times 10 for the heel bones, and finally, the value of 1. Okay, so what do I have? I have 3,000,000 plus 200,000 plus 400 plus 20 plus 1. So that gives me 3,200,000 421, and that is my answer for this particular one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on. So before we do the reverse procedure of changing Hindu-Arabic numerals to an Egyptian numeral, we need to talk about how to write a numeral in expanded form, because this will help us be able to easily convert back and forth. So we're just going to do a quick example or a couple quick examples on how to write something out in expanded form. The first directions for the first example say to write 345 in simplified expanded form. So what I do is I do 3 times, and the 3 is in the 100s position, plus the 4 is in the 10s position, plus, and the 5 is in the 1s position. So this is simplified expanded form. If we're going to write it in true expanded form, we have to use those exponents. So I can write this as 3 times 10 to the second. Remember I told you however many zeros it has, that's what your exponent is. Plus 4 times 10 to the first. Remember 10's place is represented as 10 to the first. Plus, now this one you may or may not remember, this is going to be 5 times 10 to the 0. Because remember, anything raised to the 0 power is 1. So this is true expanded form, and this is what expanded form means. For our examples, when we go from the Hindu-Arabic to the Egyptian, we're going to use this step. But if you had a question on the test that asked you to write something in expanded form, this is what I want as an answer. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so the steps. So to writing something in expanded form, determine each of the place values in terms of base 10. Multiply the values together by the proper base 10 exponent, and then add all the values together. All right, so if we have 7,634, and I want this written in expanded form, I'm going to start with the 7. The 7 is in the thousandths position. So this becomes 7 times 10 to the third. Because remember, thousandths means 3 zeros. The 6 is in the hundreds position. So this becomes 6 times 10 to the second. The 3 is in the tens position. So this becomes 3 times 10 to the first. And the 4 is in the ones position. So this becomes 4 times 10 to the 0. I want you guys to notice my exponents are decreasing until we get to 0. Because remember, 10 to the 0 is the ones position, 10 to the first is 10, 10 to the second is hundreds, and 10 to the third is thousands. So your last step to write something in expanded form is just to add them all together. So use parentheses. We do 7 times 10 to the third plus 6 times 10 to the second plus 3 times 10 to the first. And yeah, you can leave it as just 3 times 10, but I put it to the first just to be proper. Plus 4 times 10 to the 0. Okay, and that is your answer for this particular problem. And there are the steps. Okay, here's another one. Write 32,010 in expanded form. So what do we do here? We do 3 times, and this is going to be, it's in the 10,000 spot. So let's write it out in simplified first, and then we can fix it. Plus 2 times that 2 is in the thousandths place, plus the 0 is in the hundred space, plus the 1 is in the tens place, and then finally the last 0 is in the ones place. So let's go ahead and fix this up. 3 times 10 to the 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So 3 times 10 to the fourth plus 2 times 10 to the third, because there's 3 zeros, plus 0 times 10 squared plus 1 times 10 plus 0 times 10 to the 0. And once again, let's go ahead and put that as 10 to the first. So here is expanded form. That's what I'll be looking for in terms of an answer. Okay, we're on objective 4, and this is going to end out the video. There'll be another video that you'll need to watch to finish out the section. So objective 4 says write a Hindu-Arabic numeral as an Egyptian numeral. So what we're going to do is we're going to write the number out in expanded form. We're going to translate each place value into an Egyptian hieroglyphic, and then we're going to answer the question by placing all the Egyptian hieroglyphics together. Okay, so 347 as an Egyptian numeral. All right, the 3 is in the 100s position. The 4 is in the tens position. And the 7 is in the ones position. That's all I need to be able to do this. I'm not going to put this in like as 10 to the second, 10 to the first, 10 to the 0, because I don't need it to convert it into an Egyptian numeral. Okay, so I need something that represents 100, and we know that 100 is the scroll. I also need something that represents 10, and 10 is the heel bone. And I also need something that represents 1, and 1 is the staff. So now I just have to put the pieces together. So I need 3 scrolls. I need 4 heel bones, because it's 4 times 10. And I need 7 staffs. And this is my answer. Okay? Let's look at the next one and the last example. Write 10,400 as an Egyptian numeral. So the 1 is in the 10,000ths position. And then I don't have anything until I get to the hundreds position, in which I have a 4. So 4 times 100. 10,000, remember, is the pointing finger. And then 100, we just did that, is the scroll. Okay, so I need 1 pointing finger. And I need 4 scrolls. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And this would be the Egyptian numeral. I do want to make a quick note for you. When we look at Egyptian hieroglyphics for real, remember they only had so much space because they were literally carving it in stone. So sometimes they may have placed things out of order, but it still remained that a scroll equals 100. So if they're out of order, it's okay. It still means the same thing. Okay, so finally we are done with at least the first part of 4.1. There is another video that you will need to watch covering Roman numerals. So go ahead and watch both. Once again, make sure you're filling out your notes as you're watching these, so that way you can just upload them to Canvas.